It's 16 minutes past 9 on Wednesday's Newstalk Breakfast. As usual, we have our political panel. We have no Paul Core today, or editor. We just have two star players. Joan Burton, Minister for Social Protection and candidate for the leadership of the Labour Party on the 4th of July. And Mary-Lou McDonald, Sinn Féin Deputy Leader and, of course, TD for Dublin Central. If you'd like to join the conversation, you can text us at 53106, tweet us at BreakfastNT and email us at breakfast@newstalk.ie. And if you have a comment to make, 1890 453 108 and we can play it on air. You're both most welcome. Let's start with the topical issue of the day. The Cook report is out in relation to GSOC surveillance. Does this bring closure to the issue, Joan?
Well, I think it's a very helpful report in that it clarifies fairly clearly the issues that exist between GSOC and clearly upper echelons of the Garda Síochána. And I think what has been proposed in relation to the development of an independent Garda authority is absolutely relevant and essential. In all modern police forces, there are issues of how do you properly oversight the police force, while the police force and the Garda Síochána itself obviously has the most important role of policing and protecting the security and safety of the citizens of the state. And essentially, I think that is what is at the heart of the discussion. And clearly when issues arose where GSOC appeared to come to believe that they were being bugged or in danger of being bugged, Justice Cook, or the former Justice Cook, examined those allegations and found that in fact two of them he believed didn't hold water, and in the third it was not possible to actually reach a definitive conclusion. But I think the heart of the matter is how we have the best Garda force to protect our citizens and how we have proper oversight of that force. And that is essential to modern policing. So I think the Cook report is going to feed very importantly into not just the work of the government, but also into the work of the Justice Committee and the other committees in the Dáil and the discussion on the development of the independent Garda authority.
And specifically on the fallout, Joan Burton, the position of Simon O'Brien, the chairperson, the two criticisms are, one, he didn't inform the minister, which he should have done, about the investigation, and secondly, that he overreacted in carrying out the investigation, and perhaps some evidence with the leaks that there's division within GSOC.
What has been requested by the government is that obviously GSOC will reflect on the report and they will give their views on the report, because obviously Mr O'Brien is the chair of GSOC. There are other members of GSOC, and it's clearly pointed out as well, and this will happen in the context of the development of the independent Garda authority for policing in this country. There will be developments and need to be developments to the GSOC legislation.
Mary-Lou, do you think Simon O'Brien's position is undermined by the Cook report?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the report reflects yet again the very deep trouble that the relationship between Garda management and GSOC was in. And I think that in and of itself is a cause for concern. I think there is a recognition by Cook that GSOC acted in good faith. He may argue that they acted hastily and so on, but nonetheless he doesn't question their bona fides in that regard. In the broader scheme of things, obviously Cook's report has come back. It has concrete findings, although given the nature of what he was being asked to investigate, it can't be absolutely definitive. I've seen some interesting commentary from the Irish Council for Civil Liberties, which raises questions over the terms of reference and the manner in which Cook went about his task. And I think they raise some legitimate questions there, which I think should be of concern to the Justice Committee in particular. But the bottom line is that we have to have an oversight facility that works. Public confidence has to be rebuilt in Garda Síochána for the general public, but also for the officers that serve within the force.
So Alan Shatter's vindicated, is he?
I don't think so. I think Alan Shatter at every turn over his tenure as minister added to the angst and the tension that clearly existed between GSOC and senior Garda management. And I don't think it was ever helpful for him to take such a defensive position in regard of Garda management or an offensive position in regards of the Ombudsman's office. I think that was a bad call from him as Minister of the day.
Do you think Cook should appear before the Justice Committee?
I do. I think that would be useful. Obviously, the report only came out last night, so people are still digesting its contents. I think it would be a good thing, given now that we are on a route of root and branch reform of Garda oversight, and we're looking at the formation of an independent authority for An Garda Síochána. I think all of that would be in the good. It's in the public good to have these matters
Joan,
fully
would you
ventilated.
support John Cook appearing before the Justice Committee?
Well, I think there's a case for that, because I think this is a really important report that points, if you like, to a very complex and obviously clearly at times difficult relationship between the Gardaí, or the senior echelons of the Gardaí, and GSOC. And I think what's really important is to look at is what do we want to come out of what has been, a fairly traumatic period in terms of policing in Ireland. And what we want to come out of this is the absolute rebuilding of full public confidence in the really important work that An Garda Síochána do for everybody in this country, and that's vital to the prosperity and to the peace of the country. But secondly, in modern policing, you need oversight, because in a large force of, at any one time, you're talking about 12 to 13,000 members of the force. You actually need to be able to address issues that give rise from time to time to public concern. And that's, if you like, the roles are both separate, but they're also complementary. And what it seems to me, and again, I just got the report last night. There was a cabinet meeting last night at which we were given the report, so I want to study it in greater detail. But I do think it'll be important for the Justice Committee to work in the way that committees work best, when they examine issues in detail and they reflect, if you like, the input that they have representing different parts of the country, different party groups, and they input that into the debate, because this debate is really vital for our democracy in this country, and also, frankly, for policing, which is so important to everybody.
I think the addition, just to make an additional rider to that, I think we need to move from a position where we think about the Garda Síochána as a force to a position where we have a model that it is a service. And I agree absolutely with Joan that the standards of democratic accountability are absolutely essential in terms of public confidence, but so are the levels of resourcing for An Garda Síochána. And I think that there has been a real difficulty if you look at policing from the ground up, that there have been clear instances of shortage of resources, whether it's things as basic as cars or bikes or basic equipment, where the service itself is stretched to capacity, and yet you have always had a huge reluctance on the part of senior Garda management to come out and speak on behalf of the service and to make a demand, if you like, of government, because we can have excellent oversight, democratic accountability. That's absolutely superb. But if on the ground, in communities, I'm thinking of specifically, say, inner city communities, if you still have a situation where people don't see an effective police service in action, then you still have a crisis of
let's move on,
confidence
because you can both talk for Ireland, so let's stay in the subject. So let's go to mother and baby homes. Our guests in studio are Joan Burton, the Minister for Social Protection, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party for now. No matter what, she's going to be out of that job in a month, but which job she's in, we shall see. And also in studio, Mary Lou McDonald, the Sinn Féin Deputy Leader and TD for Dublin Central. I want to ask you both about mother and baby homes and where Ireland is heading now. Minister, first of all, your assessment of what the government has decided, when the work will get underway, and the importance of some of it being in public.
Well, first of all, Chris, I have to confess to having a personal interest in this, in that as a child I was adopted. So obviously the matters are of very significant personal concern to me, as well as of political concern. Again, can I just say, To focus on Ireland, what we want are children who are loved, children who are properly cared for, and their parents are treated with respect. And that applies then, that applies now. I think what we had in Ireland of 40, 50 years ago was a society which was utterly clerically dominated by a very puritanical form of Christianity, which meant basically that if women had sex outside of marriage and if they became pregnant, that pregnancy was a cause of shame, obviously to the church authorities, but more particularly as well to their families and to their communities. And I think it's really welcome that we're now going to have an inquiry, and this is my view irrespective of politics. It's not a political view particularly, it's a personal view as well. This has been my view for a long, long period of time. My own view as well is that the format of a commission of inquiry will allow for, if you like, a structure, a modular structure, a sequential structure in which a number of critical issues have come up from time to time. I know many of the people who've been involved in the Adopted Peoples, Adopted Rights Alliance over the years, and there are a series of issues which they have wanted addressed. There's also the whole story, and by the way, something over 50,000 children were adopted in Ireland since the introduction of adoption law. And I just want to say as well, in relation to those 50,000 plus children, most of them, if not almost all of them, went to very loving and caring homes. And I think it's important that we remember that there are the mothers who gave birth to the children and the fathers, who we very rarely hear much mention of, but they were there as well.
Yes or no, do you favour a legal right to adoptees to get their birth cert?
I have, and I've spoken on this on a number of occasions. It's been my view. That legislation, by the way, has existed in Scotland for decades. It's existed in the UK, in Canada.
Frances done damn all about it when she was there.
Well, I think there's been an enormous amount, actually, of legal work done on it. There are two different points of view. One is that the matter can be addressed legally. The other is that a constitutional referendum is required. And there is a very profound discussion going on between lawyers in relation to how this can be resolved. But what I want to say as well, and I'm saying this again with a slight personal hat on, is that some people who've been adopted wish to trace. Other people don't. And you're in a situation where you actually have to have regard to the individual situation of each person and how they would wish to approach it. And that actually has to be respected. But more importantly, I think it's so important, you know, if you look back to the work that Mary Raftery did in States of Fear, someone whom I was privileged to know personally, you actually see that this is part of a whole evolving picture of what happened to our children in our society after independence, when essentially there was a kind of clerical control which in turn had a huge amount of social support from the wider community. And I think we all have to ask ourselves questions.
Mary Lou McDonald, your thoughts first of all on the inquiry. Lots of it is going to have to be private and confidential, and that's only just, but the importance that public see this happening as well.
Well, I think the first thing that we were anxious to establish was that the inquiry would have statutory powers, and I'm glad that that is the case, because we had the experience with the Macaleese Interdepartmental Committee where really it was a halfway house, and notwithstanding the fact that it opened up the opportunity for a long overdue apology to the women and girls of the Magdalen laundries, it didn't go nearly far enough. So I'm glad that we have statutory powers.
On the Magdalen stuff, we learned yesterday that the 4 orders, 2 of them have ignored the Minister for Justice for a year.
That's right. So where we are now is we have a commitment for a commission with statutory powers. That's absolutely essential. We now need to establish in very precise terms the terms of reference and also the scope of the investigation. And crucially in that regard, I think we need to be inclusive in respect of the institutions that are included, because you have what are the term mother and baby home is used, but of course to capture really the essence of what happened within various these institutions, you have to cast the net quite widely. You need to take account of county homes. You need to take account of, to give you an example, the West Bank home of Greystones, which was fed by the Bethany home in Rathgar. You have to take account of the Protestant, the Church of Ireland, Magdalen home, the one on Leeson Street, subsequently moved to Eglinton Road. Many of these institutions and many of these survivors have never had any recognition from the state. They've never had any examination of their experience, any vindication of their experience. And it's very important at this stage that in the context of a statutory inquiry, that it is inclusive. So to understand the mother and baby homes,
that
to
could
use
take
the
some
term,
time.
yes.
What you're laying out could take a lot of time.
Well, hold on.
Can I just
sorry, no, please.
Okay.
I'd like
I
to
just
finish
want to
this.
agree with that. The data is available.
Sorry.
Okay, so it does need to take years.
To understand the mother and baby homes, you have to include the Magdalen laundries. It makes no sense to have what would be a thorough statutory investigation into those institutions and exclude the laundries. And I think by including the laundries, we can make up for the very substantial deficits that were present in the McAleese process. In terms of data and records, there's plenty of records and there is plenty of data. It's a question of the state and the inquiry getting its hands on that data and on those records. And I agree with Joan in terms of the broader societal norms of an Ireland that isn't too much in the dim and distant past. I think that's true. I think the churches, the religious orders all have a case to answer. However, when you pare all of this back, the really culpable party, and where we need to look in the first instance, is the responsibility of the state as the entity that in the final analysis, whatever about the quirks or perversions of public opinion or public sentiment or the actions or inactions of a private institution, it is the state in the final analysis that must act as a bulwark, as the protector of individual rights, particularly vulnerable women and vulnerable children. And bear in mind, none of this happened in the dark ages. It happened at a time where there was legislation on the statute books, where Ireland as a state had signed up to various international standards and covenants in international law. So the state, in my view, failed to act, and I think the state has to face that fairly and squarely.
Okay, we're at 9:33. We've less than 10 minutes left. Two texts here. Two socialists in studio. I have a feeling I'll be paying more tax at the end of the interview. Be careful, Ivan. They'll reach into your pockets too. And Kieran says, Jesus, the girls are getting on like a house on fire. Snap general election, please. Well, Mary Lou, behind your back, this is what Joan was saying earlier in the week.
There is still a Sinn Féin IRA nexus. I don't want to go through all of the controversies that were raised in recent times. But while the Labour Party is here having a democratic and open conversation, and a difficult conversation, I challenge Sinn Féin to have the kind of conversation that we're having here with each other, and they won't have it.
Joan, what I want to ask you is this. There is the real prospect that you will be the next leader of the Labour Party, and good luck to you. The future of the left in Ireland, if you actually look at it, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael got about 45% in the last election, which means an assortment of left parties, including Labour, Sinn Féin, People Before Profit and so on, got over 50%. If in a clear blue sky you were leading the Labour Party, do you favour, after the next election, a coalition of the left, or are you excluding the possibility of Labour and Sinn Féin working together in government?
Just let me just go back a little bit into history. In 1973, there was a coalition government of Fine Gael and Labour. And just to contrast what was happening at that stage, there was obviously a hugely violent situation in the north of Ireland, in which the Provisional IRA played a leading part. At the same time, in that government, a Labour minister, Frank Clusky, just to go back to the earlier topic, brought in really important legislation, which for the first time gave women who were parenting on their own the right to receive an allowance from the state. Now, there were 3 allowances, and the titles of them are very, very dated, so I don't want to cause offence to anybody, but it was the Prisoner's Wives Allowance, the Deserted Wives Allowance, and the Unmarried Mother's Allowance, what we would now call allowances for women parenting on their own. That was the single most important piece of legislation in closing down the mother and baby homes that we've just been talking about, because from then on, a married woman, for instance, her and her husband separated, and say she subsequently had a relationship with somebody else and became pregnant.
And how is that relevant to my question?
Oh, because the relevance is this. The Labour Party is a democratic party, above all else, which believes in the parliamentary process and which does not believe in violence. I believe there are still unanswered questions, as I said at the meeting, in relation to Sinn Féin's history in terms of a nexus of Sinn Féin and the IRA. We already had, before the local elections, fairly lengthy discussions across the airwaves in Ireland and in newspapers of various incidents that occurred, including episodes where parents were murdered and very significant numbers of children were left on their own and in fact ended up in institutions.
Issue for you.
I think it's a very important issue that we have a full discussion by Sinn Féin of their past and of the various issues that have been raised about that past. I'm a supporter of the peace process. I welcome and I acknowledge the work that Sinn Féin has done. But for me, and for I would say the vast majority of Labour Party people, and I think the vast majority of people in the country, there are unanswered questions. The second issue then, of course, is the issue of economic policies, which I don't believe would actually lead to prosperity and work for people.
Okay, Mary Lou, the issue of the sort of contamination of
the
history.
IRA nexus. Well, the initial thing when I heard Joan's comments was it occurred to me, I wondered, did Joan approach Eamon Gilmore with concerns as regards any nexus with the IRA, or is she entirely unaware of the fact that within her own party, in fact the leader, the current leader of your own party had a relationship with the official IRA? And when the time comes, Ivan, as I hope it will sooner rather than later, when we do have a framework to recount exactly the whats and whys and wherefores of what happened in the north of Ireland in the course of a very brutal, very vicious conflict, it might surprise Joan to realise that in fact her current party leadership and their colleagues in the past throughout the 1970s, the precise period that you cite, will have some interesting questions to answer and I hope a full account to give. Let me say this, and let's just be absolutely clear about this. You can't have it both ways, Joan. You see, you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth and say, I'm a supporter of the peace process. I applaud the work that Sinn Féin has done as one of the architects of that peace process.
I applaud the work that John Hume has done. Let me be clear about that.
And then on the other hand, and I recognise John Hume also, but please recognise that the Republican and Sinn Féin leadership were absolutely crucial to the design and the delivery of that process, and remain, by the way, crucial to the delivery of that process, because we're not finished just yet. So you can't have it both ways. So you want to be on the right side of the argument in supporting the peace, and yet you want to constantly go back to a very jaded, very unconvincing refrain of drumming up and regurgitating and in a very opportunistic way using the fact of the suffering of people in the north to somehow take potshots at us. Bear this in mind, Joan. No, hold on. Let me finish my point.
You've had a very long speech.
You've had a very
long speech.
And you may bear this in mind. You may bear this in mind. Sinn Féin, unlike the Labour Party, is nationally organised. Sinn Féin goes to the people of the north of Ireland, the very people who suffered in that very conflict. And Sinn Féin enjoys the trust and the confidence and indeed the respect of those same people. So if we want to delve back into history for opportunistic reasons, that's your business. I'm for moving on.
Sorry, Joan, two things. One, I want you to reply to that, and also go on to the point of economic difference as well, because we've only a few minutes left.
I think the notion that my opposition to violence is somehow or other opportunistic by Mary Lou is really wrong. I actually think that this country is and was capable, and I mean this country, this whole island, is and was capable of being ruled and being governed without violence. That is a fundamental difference that you and I have.
In fact, it's not.
Sorry, just
well, in
now.
fact, it's not.
Just hold on. You've just given a very, very long speech. If there is a distinguishing mark of the modern Labour Party, it is that during all of the difficulties in the North, the individual and the party that we most supported was John Hume. I was a member of the government in the government of Fianna Fáil and the Labour Party when the peace process, in fact, first came fully, let's say, into southern debate. And by the way, it was heavily contested.
Do you expect the DUP to go into government with Sinn Féin but not Labour?
Well, it's a power-sharing government with particular arrangements. It's not a government in the same way as exists in the Republic of Ireland, as Sinn Féin constantly tell us, because, for instance, when issues of social provision come up in the North, the standard response of Sinn Féin is we couldn't give as much child benefit or any other benefit because we don't have those kind of powers. And that's what Sinn Féin has to say. We're talking about a fundamental approach in this country around democracy, around the rule of law,
can I
and
say,
around peace.
Because I really am caught by time here. Mary Lou, can I put it to point? I was reading the Sinn Féin economic stuff, and we'll say an extra 3% on high earners over 100 grand. It brings in 150 million. To abolish the local property tax and change USC will cost over 600 million. You have had a light analysis of your economic policy, I put it to you.
Well, Ivan, can I put it back to you that there has been, pre the last election, it seems, an even lighter analysis of the economic positioning of the Labour Party and indeed of Fine Gael. Can I also say this, just so there's no misunderstanding? There's nobody elected to the Dáil or to any other institution in this state that I know of who is not for the peace process and who does not understand that violence, political violence, is not an option, that we now have a democratic, peaceful pathway for it. I was a baby in 1973. So were lots of the people who were recently elected for Sinn Féin in local authorities across the state and beyond, indeed across the country. I suspect that's really what's getting under your skin, Joan. Each and every one of those women and those men are committed to economic equality, to social justice, to the peaceful reunification of our country. That is our political platform. We are very proud of what Sinn Féin has achieved. We are very proud of the communities that we represent, north and south. We're really proud of the northern communities who, unlike others, from the comfort of a perch far away from the streets of Belfast and Derry, could point the finger and preach at nationalist communities there and didn't lift a finger when they could to intervene. We're very proud that those communities kept faith with us. We're very proud of what we're constructed. I'll tell you what, we're determined to deliver on it. And you're carping in a negative way to try and abuse what happened in the past does you no credit, Joan.
Well,
and I think you ought to know better.
I think your failure to be able to discuss openly the past of your own party is deeply regrettable. I think your suggestions that people didn't lift a finger, the finger that was required to be lifted in those days was to do with violence. That's what people in the South, that is what people in the South rejected. Your party has come on a long route to recognise that the violence that happened in the North, in fact, ultimately was counterproductive. Seamus Mallon put it well when he said it was the scenic route and the slow route to understand that it would be democratic work rather than violence which would actually help both parts of this island to progress and for people to find work. The most important issue for me as a politician and for the Labour Party is to return people in this country to prosperity, to get individuals and families back to work, to get houses built. That's what the great democratic programme of this era is
delivering
about.
on it according
Well,
to the electorate.
actually, we have
given
a
their
gonna leave it
burden
there
on
because-
your job so far.
Well,
we
let's see.
we could all fight
Let's
all day.
see.
We could all fight all day on
Let's
this.
see.
Thank you both for joining us this morning and for that discussion.
Can I just give a text? Great to hear two capable and intelligent women debating on your show. What great role models for young women. We're going to go to the movie.